President Donald Trump was no stranger to bold moves, but this day marked something different. Among the piles of daily correspondence, a handwritten letter stood out, ink smudged, paper slightly crumpled, from a small-town farmer named Hank Callahan. Instead of filing it away or brushing it off, Trump did something unexpected. He accepted Hank's invitation to visit his struggling farm. As the presidential motorcade pulled into the dusty driveway, Secret Service agents scanned the property with trained eyes. Hank, a proud third-generation farmer with sun-worn skin and calloused hands, wiped his palms on his faded overalls. He stepped forward and extended a firm handshake. "Mr. President," he said, steady and unflinching, "thank you for coming. But I'm not here to flatter you." Trump gave a half-smirk. "Didn't think you were." Without wasting time, Hank laid out the reality: no speeches, no filters. "Politicians made promises," he said, "but out in the fields, prices kept falling, fuel costs kept rising, and farmers were suffocating under debt." Trump crossed his arms, responding that progress took time, but Hank shook his head. Time was a luxury his land didn't have. The farm was weary, families were breaking under the pressure, and massive corporations were swallowing up small farms like his. Trump pushed back, insisting he'd done more for farmers than most presidents, but Hank didn't flinch. "Then why are we still fighting to survive?" The atmosphere grew heavy. Secret Service agents shifted, sensing the tension. Then Hank's wife, Martha, stepped in. "Gentlemen," she said softly, "why don't we sit inside?" In the modest kitchen, walls lined with fading family photos and worn-out furniture, the conversation continued over cornbread and coffee. Hank pointed to the nearly empty fridge. "We grow food for thousands, but there are nights we skip dinner to make ends meet." Trump frowned, listening more than speaking. Martha placed a warm slice of cornbread in front of him. "Here's what struggling America tastes like," she said gently. Trump chewed slowly. It was good. More than that, it was honest. Outside, Hank led Trump to the edge of the field. He held up his weathered hands, each line telling a story of toil and persistence. "These hands worked this land when I was a boy," he said. "Same as my father. Same as his." Trump studied them, silent. "But hard work isn't enough anymore," Hank said, voice low but firm. "We don't want handouts. We want fair ground to stand on." Trump nodded. "Ever driven a tractor?" "Come on," Hank said with a grin, leading him to an old green John Deere. Trump climbed aboard, awkward at first, gripping the controls as the machine lurched forward. It wasn't easy, but he managed. Hank leaned in, his voice steady. "This is how America eats. It's not business to us, it's personal." They returned to the house, sweat on their brows. "Banks call us risks," Hank said. "Big corporations get bailouts. We get foreclosure notices." Trump frowned. "I believe in free markets." "Then make them fair," Hank replied. "Because if we go under, so does your food supply." As dusk settled over the fields, the old barn casting long shadows, something shifted. Trump looked around, not at policies or data points, but at the soul of a way of life. When Martha offered dinner, he paused. His advisors would object. His schedule was tight. But he nodded. "All right," he said. Inside, Martha served mashed potatoes, grilled chicken, and cornbread, warm and hearty. Hank gave a half-smile. "No fancy White House meals here." Trump took a bite and nodded. "Good food." Hank leaned across the table, his voice even. "We've shown you our world, Mr. President. It's not about pity. It's about survival. What happens when you leave matters more than what you say now." Trump set his fork down and looked across the table. Something about this dinner, the simplicity, the honesty, struck a chord. Hank watched him carefully. Something was changing. Or at least, beginning to. The dinner had ended, but the conversation hadn't. As they cleared the plates, John let out a weary sigh. Stronger protections for small farmers, he said. Better trade policies, fairer markets. Trump leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. I've been tough on trade, he remarked. But John wasn't impressed. The struggle continued, unchanged. We don't need more politics, he said. We need real action. Lisa chimed in gently, her voice carrying more than words. Farming isn't numbers, Mr. President. It's families. It's generations of work. Trump looked around their modest home again, the faded wallpaper, the chipped counter, the framed photos on the shelf. The weight of their reality settled on him. This wasn't just about policies anymore, it was about people. As the sun dipped behind the barn, casting long shadows across the land, John leaned back in his chair. So, Mr. President, what now? Trump took a breath, the air thick with expectation. I don't make empty promises. John raised an eyebrow, half smiling. Good. Because we've heard enough of those. Trump stood and extended his hand. Give me time. John folded his arms, hesitant. We don't have much. But after a moment, he reached out and shook it. Then prove it. As the convoy disappeared down the dirt road, Trump turned for one last look at the fields. Something had shifted. This wasn't a photo op. It wasn't campaign theater. It was personal now. John had challenged him, not with anger, but with honesty, and that left a mark. 2 weeks later, John was repairing a fence when his phone buzzed. He wiped the sweat from his brow and answered. This is John. A familiar voice came through the line. John, it's Donald Trump. For a moment, John stood frozen. Mr. President. I haven't forgotten. Something's in motion. Then the line went dead. John stared at his phone, heart pounding. Maybe, just maybe, something really was happening. Lisa walked out with a towel over her shoulder. Who was that? He looked up, a grin tugging at his face. The President of the United States. And for the first time in years, John felt something rare, hope. A month passed. John sat in his truck, radio humming softly. Then a news alert broke the silence. President Trump has signed an executive order to protect small farmers from unfair corporate practices. John's jaw dropped. Lisa ran outside. Did you hear? He leapt out of the truck, stunned. He actually did it. Across the country, farmers stood still, some with tears in their eyes. For the first time in decades, they had been heard. John, a humble farmer from a forgotten corner of America, had sparked something bigger than himself. One afternoon, a black SUV rumbled up John's driveway. A Secret Service agent stepped out. Mr. Mitchell, the president would like to see you. Minutes later, Trump stepped onto the porch, extending his hand. Told you I wouldn't forget. John shook his head, smiling. I'll admit, I'm impressed. Inside, Lisa poured coffee as Trump sat across the kitchen table. So what brings you back? She asked. Trump leaned forward. There's still work to do. I want to hear more. Outside, they walked the fields again, boots pressing into the dirt. Trump asked what farmers truly needed. John didn't hesitate: roads, irrigation, reliable equipment, access to markets. Trump nodded. Let's make it happen. John squinted. You're serious? Trump smirked. You should know by now, I don't joke about winning. John chuckled, the weight on his shoulders just a little lighter. For the first time, he saw a future where farming wasn't just a losing battle. Something was shifting, and it had all begun with that letter. Soon, reporters swarmed the farm. Why did the president come back? They asked. John shrugged. Because he actually cares. Critics rolled their eyes, calling it a stunt. But John knew better. Trump had returned not to speak, but to listen. Standing before the cameras, Trump's voice carried across the fields. Farmers are the backbone of America. I won't let them fall. And for once, politics faded. Americans saw a leader choosing action over applause. Calls poured in. "John, you got through to him." He laughed. "I just told the truth." His phone rang again. "Trump. John, you've become the face of this movement." John shook his head. "I'm just a farmer." Trump chuckled. "Exactly." Later, John sat at the table, sorting through a stack of policy drafts. He frowned. There was still work ahead. Another call from Trump: "I want you on an advisory board." John blinked. "Me? Who better to represent real farmers?" He looked at Lisa. She nodded quietly. Maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to make lasting change. A few weeks later, John stepped into the White House. The marble floors felt foreign. The chandeliers, surreal. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. Trump turned to him. "Tell them what farmers really need." John took a breath and began. "All right, let's get to work." Months later, he stood in his fields again, watching his children laugh and race between rows of corn. Lisa joined him, smiling. "You changed things." John shook his head. "We did." From a single letter, a movement had grown. Farmers were no longer invisible. And John? He was still just a farmer, but now his voice mattered. One unexpected conversation had sparked it all. And that, against all odds, changed everything.